It's monthly Mormon Mondays. It's time for the secret handshake. Tune in and race through the veil. It's time for monthly Mormon Monday.
Hey, we hope you're having a white and delightsome monthly Mormon Monday. It's me, Paranoid American, and this is Heidi Love. How you doing?
Yes, good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm actually excited about this one, and hopefully it's as entertaining as informational because I got a bunch of questions about history and just like Mormon stuff that don't make any sense at all to me. That this show, it made me feel like I have a chance of understanding a little bit more, but I also realize it's an unhealthy way to approach TV shows as like, oh,
Oh,
this will
no.
teach me about my history. And when I
Oh,
say my,
boy.
I mean American, maybe not Mormon, but we'll see.
Oh, man. Fun.
Well, and I also want to point out too, spoiler alerts ahead. If you watch this show and you don't know what you're in for, by the end of the very first episode, it gets pretty intense. Like it's actually a really awesome opening to a show. So if you don't want to have that spoiled for you, whatever. We're going to talk about what happens in all those different episodes. And Heidi's put together some really cool fact versus fiction stuff. So the things that are brought up in the TV show, and I got a couple. I'll just show you guys what the show is actually about. So this is American Primeval. Came out this year, I guess. It's classified as a western. It's like a badass western, and I believe that it's like a limited, just one-off season. Who knows if there'll be like a season two? But it seems like it's a self-contained season. But
I
really,
saw the season 2 was in the works.
okay. I'm excited now. So even though it's so you're like, what the hell is primeval? What does that even mean? Well, like medieval is like the middle age, right? Well, primeval is like the first age. So this is basically saying the very first stages of America. This is American primeval. So, but they might have well just called it like Mormon cowboys or something because it really this show doesn't exist without Mormons. Like the
Right.
Mormons are the backbone of this entire show
Yes. Yep.
as the good
Yep.
guys, right?
Well, and I think they're the only other than the Bridgers, the only real people in the show, right? Like, so kind of interesting, just so people know. Yeah. A lot of the others are not 100% truthful. I mean, there is Native Americans in it that are truthful, but they didn't, for some reason, didn't base it off of the actual chief, and we'll get into that. But
All
thought
right,
that
well,
was weird.
I want to just rip the band-aid off and get like the big spoiler out of the way so we don't have to like dance around it. So, spoiler alert, in the very first episode, the premise is basically we're watching this lady trying to make her way through the West with her kid. And her kid's got like one of those Forrest Gump knee brace things on. So he's clearly got some kind of like a physical issue. So they stand out a little bit, but also they seem like they would just be a burden. So it's not easy for her to figure out a way to get someone to help her across. And she showed up something like 3 weeks late. So now they've missed their chance. So if you ever played Oregon Trail, or if you know anything about like the Donner Party, for example, she's kind of in like a Donner Party situation. It's not about the Donner Party, but they're trying to pass roughly the same kind of terrain around the same type of year. And everyone's just saying, like, wait until next spring, lady. You're not going to make it. And she refuses to because one of the spoiler alerts is that she's on the run from the law for murdering somebody, and maybe there's like a bank robbery or something. They make it seem like she's an outlaw on the run. She's not just some random lady. And also, the only people that she can seem to link up with are these Mormons. And the Mormons are like, all right, fine. We're
Let
good
her
people.
come. Yeah.
We gotta let you come. You're just,
She's a
a playboy.
girl,
Maybe
wink,
I can add
wink.
you to my stocks, right? Maybe you can be
Yep,
wife number
exactly.
12. So
Yeah.
she goes with them, and wouldn't you know it, the very first place they stop, I think this is the Mountain Meadow Valley or something, where there
Right.
was a huge, I guess like a debatable point in Mormon history, but Mormons dress up as Indians and they come and just slaughter everybody. And they even make a note at the beginning of
This
this
is real.
episode.
Yeah.
Someone's like, why did you let the Mormons come with us? And the guy says, well, I want to see if they'll kill their own, because they know they're going to get harassed by these Mormons. And we'll just see. Maybe they'll kind of be like this buffer. Newsflash, the Mormons didn't really care. They just killed everybody. And the lady and her son gets away. And the guy that they hitched the wagon with originally, this Mormon guy, he also miraculously survives despite getting scalped and everything. But he doesn't necessarily know that it was the Mormons at the very beginning of this show. So that's the very first episode, is that you find the whole series is really about Brigham Young and sending out these sort of mercenaries, these Mormon mercenaries, to harass these settlers. A couple of them get away, and now what the hell are we going to do about this? If this gets out, this could change everything. So interesting start to the very first episode. As soon as I saw it, I was like, how have I not watched it? Oh, we don't already talked about this.
Everybody contacted me at the same time. Like everybody was like, have you seen this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm watching it. And so
I'm super late to the parade, I assume.
No, you were one of the first. And
Okay.
but I thought it was funny. It was kind of like a cascading event afterward. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, yep, we're watching it. But it was like, okay, there's a lot of things that are kind of not correct about it, which is funny. I almost think they want to obfuscate like the whole reality that the worst part was true. The worst part on the Mormons Meadow Massacre is true. And so that part there is like all real and actually worse than they portrayed it to be, which is a whole thing. And so like, I almost feel like everything around it, because they put like Fort Bridger in it, but then the Mount Meadows Massacre is clear down south in Utah. So like, it's all not quite right. But whatever, right? Like it's like you'd be past Salt Lake City.
Right,
If
I can
you
almost imagine some like Mormon authority being like, "This show got it all wrong.
They
It's
did.
all
Oh, they did.
fabricated."
Oh
I
boy.
mean, Fort Bridger was like 40 miles south of there, not 30 miles south, and you're like, "Oh, okay." But yeah,
Oh,
like the
they were.
underlying.
I went in
Uh,
some Reddit groups and it was just a whole mess. I'm telling you guys, like they were like that. And I'm like, okay, calm down, people. But I will say this. Listen, the main parts were the Mountain Meadows Massacre really did happen. And the kind of part where they say, oh, well, we don't know this and this. No, they do know a lot of it, because they actually prosecuted and killed the guy that was quote unquote responsible for this. But really, it was Brigham Young's call. And they want to say that it wasn't Brigham Young's call, but it most certainly was Brigham Young's call. And there's a whole lot of back and forth on this. But here's the thing. According to Blood of the Prophets, okay, Will Bagley, that's a book that's by Will Bagley. There was a plan, an actual planning session with the Paiute leaders held in Salt Lake City with Brigham Young, where he promised cattle to these people to actually help them, because the one thing they couldn't do was kill the kids, because you have to remember, you can't spill innocent blood for the second anointing. Well, children under the age of 7 and under are considered innocent no matter what they do. So they brought in the Native Americans to kill the kids. And so it was bad.
I always say God loves a good workaround. I'm sure they get all the way there, and they're like,
yeah,
"Man, you're skirting in by the skin of your teeth. I see a
right.
higher to kill that 7-year-old. I guess."
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
fill in.
so that's the long and short of it. But also they dressed up as the Native Americans as well, just to like kind of hide this fact. And none of the people that survived, like there were no survivors except for kids 7 and under. And most of the time it was the very younger ones. They stole their kids afterward. And here is Brigham Young, the entrepreneur that he is. He actually sent a receipt and a bill to the government asking for orphan support for these kids that he stole. So if Brigham is not industrious, I don't know what Brigham is. But you know, he really was portrayed as the asshole he is. And the church got really ticked about this, and I just thought it was funny because they want to say, well, these kind of shows, this is the church's stance from Deseret News. They just say these kind of shows are characterized in ways that reinforce stereotypes that are harmful and inaccurate, dangerously misleading and violent, deceptive graphic violence. And I'm like, hold on, you guys were the ones killing kids. Like, wait, what? You want to talk about violence? Like, and that was in the Reddit group I was in, which was funny. They kept saying, well, people were like, this isn't accurate. And they're like, so did you want to show the kids getting murdered then? That's what you wanted? Like, it got bad in that group. I
They
was like,
asked
oh
them
my
if they were
gosh.
7 or 8 yet before they went through all of that. So,
Shoo! Yeah, they didn't want to screw up their second anointings that they already had. So
and those are some of the headlines. If you just search for American Primeval, it basically is saying, LDS is saying all of this is inaccurate, and but I mean,
everything's wrong. Yeah,
so I
like,
mean,
it
I'm not
wasn't all
saying
wrong.
Wikipedia is the
Yeah.
source of truth on any of this, but like you just go to the Wikipedia article, and it just straight up says the Mountain Meadows Massacre,
I
September
love
7th through the
no,
11th.
no, they lie. You know why they don't want to put the date that all the people died? Because it was the 11th, September 11th.
It was September 11th.
Yes,
What?
sir. Yes, sir. And
Okay,
that's the first September 11th. Yeah. I was like, uh-oh.
oh no, and we've got like a Masonic connection here
Oh,
too. So
for sure. Like 110%. And they want
okay.
to blame it. They just want to blame it. This is kind of what the church was saying. Well, why did this happen? Oh, this happened because the government was screwing with us and because we saw that they had guns and we needed them. And we were on, like a cat on a hot tin roof, basically. We were scared because of the war, like that was upcoming because they were fighting with America and they had a whole Mormon army. And America was like, we don't like that. And they were like, we didn't live here. We were in Mexico and you went and bought us. So everybody's just pissed, and they're just all fighting at this point. And that's why they say it happened. But honestly, this was planned out. And the person that executed all of these orders and actually wrote in and was the one is John D. Lee. But do you know how he relates to Brigham Young? Did you find that?
No, tell me.
It's his adopted son. And he says he didn't know anything about it. And he hung him out to dry. So when that happened, the reason why we know the facts is not because anybody lived. It's because he squealed after he realized he was going to get shot by a firing squad. He was like, no. But as soon as he died, don't worry. They did kick him out of the church for a time and said, shame on you. And then they went and did all his work again as soon as he died.
Well, so in the show, they and I watched the show and then did some of the research on like the people that come up in the show, like Wild Bill Hickman, for example. And he is an interesting character because he worked for both Brigham Young and for Joseph Smith. He was one of Joseph Smith's bodyguards, I believe.
Do you know what his nickname is? Do you know what his nickname?
What was it? Well, aside from Wild Bill?
It was Brigham's Death Angel.
Brigham's Death Angel was his other nickname. They didn't lead with that one in the show. They call him Wild Bill. But I feel like I would leave off bodyguard for Joseph Smith. I'd leave that off my resume because his bodyguard was nowhere to be seen at the most important moment, right? But so he worked with both of those guys. But so his background is that he was one of the first Danites, I guess. But then there's also these Nauvoo, and the Nauvoo is not just a city, I guess. In the show, they actually say that this Mormon militia is also the Nauvoo. So I'm trying to understand, what is a Nauvoo? Why is it the name of a group? Why is it also the name of a city? And what's the difference between like a Nauvoo and a Danite?
Well, the Danites are actually under Joseph, and they became Brighamites after the Reformation because there's going to be a reformation of the church. And the ones in Nauvoo, when they basically ran out of town again because Joseph couldn't, stop doing all the fun times he was doing. That was another part of why the Mormons were, I guess, mad, was they killed Parley Pratt because he married somebody else's wife, and the guy got pissed and killed him. So I'm like, well, it was her husband. I mean, that's not even polygamy. So all of this stuff is going on, and so they keep changing names, right? I think it kind of is like, we're going to reinvent ourselves. And so when they left Nauvoo, they were that. Then they became under Brigham, so they became Brighamites, but under Joseph, they were Danites. And so it's this whole, kind of change of, we're reinventing ourselves constantly, which is what the Mormon church likes to do frequently. Like the prophet before the one we have now, who insists that we are LDS, and I'm going to say we, because I guess I'm still Mormon somewhere in there, but I'm not. I've left, but you're raised in it. The guy before that was all about, we're Mormons, proud to be a Mormon, we're Mormons. So they do this all the time. So.
Well, they make a good point. At least me watching it, and I understand because we've been doing this show for a while, so I get some of the backstory and the context. But the Mormons present it when they come up to this wagon train. They're like, "Hey, you guys need to start moving," and the wagon train's like, "All right, we'll spend the night. We'll be out in the morning." And the Mormons are basically saying, "No, it doesn't work like that. Like, you're gonna leave right this second, or else." And that's the or else, is they come back and dressed up like as Indians and stuff. But the Mormon guy that's talking to him, and I think it might be Bill. I can't remember exactly who's talking to him originally, but he says something that, your people, meaning like non-Mormons in the States, keep pushing us out of everywhere we live. You told us to go and find our own spot. Well, we found it, and you're standing on it. Like, you're in the place that we've been pushed all the way out here. So the fact that you're following us, you're like a problem waiting to happen. So just move it along now. Get the hell off of our land. Otherwise, you're sort of encroaching. And I mean, like, if you have a like a territory dispute or like a border dispute with your neighbor, right? If they like plant something, they build something that goes over your property line, and you don't stop it, if you don't nip that in the bud, then they could actually make a claim with the county, like, "Oh, well, they didn't stop us, so technically this is part of our And I'm just trying to correlate it to like,
I have to say this. Here's the thing. There were days involved in this situation because these people came from Arkansas. Okay. So, and they had to get the notice to Brigham, which he wasn't right there. And the problem with the Baker Fancher party is they had money. And the problem with that is they saw their fine linens and their many, many, many cattle. And this made the decision for them. If nothing else, Brigham was all about money, and he made the church a complete incorporation. This had nothing to do with the way Joseph ran things, but this call was executed on purpose. And I mean, like, they had sat down and had committee meetings with the Paiutes. Like, this wasn't a quick call like they like to say it, right? Like in history, like, hey, you got to move out. Like, no, these people are having meetings about this. They are literally deciding whether or not they're going to kill men, women, and children. And the nice little part that they forgot about was that actually the Baker Fancher party said, we don't want any trouble with you. They rose white flags. They gave up all their guns, and they were like, okay, we're going to help you along. Like, we're going to, since you gave in and you gave the white flag and you gave us your weapons until we get you out of the area, we're going to help you through the area. And then they killed them and slaughtered them while they were unarmed.
So, and the official wiki page, it mentions that the Fancher Baker party, like you said, they came from Arkansas, and that all of the immigrants, with the exception of 17 children, were massacred at this Mountain Meadows massacre, which counts as 120 to 140. And wouldn't you know it, it does tell you that it happened on September 11th, 1857 on this
Oh,
one.
I knew it. Yep, it
so
started.
Wild. This is brand new news to me, or if you've mentioned it before, and maybe just
No,
I
think I didn't say anything. I was, well, we all, like, the history of the church knows it began, like I said, when it's saying the 7th, it's because that's when the very beginning of all these meetings were going on. But the 11th is Slaughter Day. And so this is so planned out, right? Like, oh my gosh. Like,
the Slaughter Day Saints.
Yeah, Slaughter Day Saint. Well, this wasn't the first time, and this is why the government was so upset with the LDS, because they were afraid. Part of the reason why, Joseph was ran out of town wasn't just the women. That was the first reason, but the second reason was he had more Masons behind him, he had inducted more people and had a bigger party than all of the areas combined. And they were like, whoa, we can't be doing this. So,
Yeah,
good salesman.
there was a note when I was looking up the Nauvoo Legion and the history of Nauvoo. One of the things specific to Nauvoo is they put up a Masonic temple, and in the Nauvoo Masonic temple, they raised more Master Masons than in any other lodge in the country. They
Yep.
were just churning them out. It turned into like a Master Mason degree factory for the Mormons, so that they could all be on the level, literally, right? So they could
Yes.
all get to like these high-ranking positions, so then they could go and start their own Mormon temples. Because I assume that you had the way that I kind of glazed over it was that you have to be a Master Mason in order to be a worshipful master. That's true. And then you had to be a worshipful master in order to really lead a Mormon temple back in the 1830s or so, like in this time period. That was sort of the formula, and you couldn't get all the way to raising your own Mormon temple if you hadn't gone through those earlier steps. Is
Right.
that
Because,
is that
well,
still
and
true, you think? Like, do you
no,
okay.
nowadays what they do is you can work on the temple, you can do anything in the temple. Like, I'm sure they don't let them go in the most secret rooms and sacred rooms, but here's the thing, you can come out and go through the temples and they'll do like an open house, even you, whoever, doesn't matter, as long as they haven't been dedicated. But back then I think they were a lot more careful about what was going on and who worked on what and how, because they were more secretive. Everything's kind of been blown. I mean, minimize other than the second anointing, like maybe that came out in the last decade. But other than that, like they have very few secrets left. So now they're like, whatever, cheapest labor. Who can do it?
So to clarify, you're saying that the this Mountain Meadows massacre here with the Baker Francher party, that is well documented fact. The Masons have not been able to separate themselves from this event, but that the lie that gets sold is that it was a spur of the moment thing, like in the show where this wagon train shows up, the Mormons are like, move it, they don't move it, so a conflict erupts. You're saying that the Mormons were essentially like, hey, there's this huge wagon train that's coming, and they've got
Rich
all
people
these
coming.
resources,
Yep.
rich people coming, and this is
Rich
our way to
people
just get an influx of cash. So how do we do
Uh-huh.
that? And so maybe there was like an agent provocateur dynamic to this, where they show up and they're like, please leave. And when they're like, do we have to? They're like, oh my God, declaration of war. We've got it.
Yes.
We've got our justification to do this thing.
Well, and even, people that were there, and Eliza Young, a lot of people will talk crap on her because she wrote a book that didn't put the church in good light, but she was one of Brigham Young's wives. And she spoke out of how the men took, this is a quote from her journal, how the men took the fine linens and dresses and gave them to their wives, and the women wore them in front of the children on purpose to re-traumatize them because they knew they were their mother's dresses of these women that were slaughtered. And they didn't give these kids back for a long time. Eventually they did give them back, but she's one of, No Man Knows My History is her book. And she's one of the few people that ever spoke out against Brigham and Joseph. And so, she just didn't approve. She thought
So
it was disgusting.
she was one of his 56 wives, and
here's the thing. He
wife
says
number
he was
19.
going forth and repopulating the earth, right? This is why the Mormons are supposed to marry so many women, is to go forth and populate the earth. Do you know he only had children with 16 of his wives?
What a loser.
16, man. My polygamy, my sister married Isaac.
You only had 16 kids with 16 different wives.
Well, he had 50 something kids with 16 wives. But here's the thing. So my sister married Warren Jeff's nephew, and he grew up with 3 moms. They had over 30 kids. So, I mean, get on it, Brigham. He's a one and done.
And you have mentioned that before, and thank you for setting up the Warren Jeff sponsorship, so that anyone that got super chats or buys memberships, that money goes directly to recruiting more into the Warren Jeffs clan. So thank you.
Not on my books. Yuck.
This is the lady that you're talking about, that was writing about this, number 56. That's interesting. Here's something that I have to know. What was the exact moment that Mormons went from being badass cowboy pirates that would like just
Right.
slaughter hundreds of people and steal their stuff and get rich to like now they're known as the most polite person in a room, right? They wouldn't
I
offend you.
actually know. I actually think I do know this. I
Can you
might
actually
have the
pinpoint a
exact
moment?
date. Yes, I can pinpoint the moment when Mormons began to play ball. And when Mormons began to play ball was under George A. Smith. He is affiliated with the Rotary Club, which is one we need to do. But the Rotary Club, he made an appearance at the Rotary Club. I don't have the exact date, but it was one of the first meetings they ever had in Utah after Skull and Bones is set up, and actual branch members from Yale came out to set that up here, and they've never done that before or since. His son, so put in George Albert. He's a skinny guy. He's a little
George Albert Smith.
Put in his son. It's the same name. But anyway, his son is going to be the one we want. Put in
George A. Smith
Jr.
Jr.
Yes. Should be. I'll know as soon as you show him. He looks scary. He's got these crazy eyes. Anyway,
on this one, yeah.
he ends up being one of the few people that was like, I don't really want to be a prophet of the church. I want to be a banker. And sure, a damn enough, he became one. And when he became a banker, his little butt landed on Time magazine. And I will say, I do believe that was a nod, like, we're here to play ball, America. We are down. And he was down with the Rotary Club. Let me tell you, he was in like every club. He was in all the clubs. He was in every single club, period. And it was actually really wild looking up his history. And he looks nothing like his dad. He looks crazy. He's the one that I said looked like a Nephilim. Yeah.
This says that he was the student body president of Harvard Business School from 33 to 34.
If it's the right one, let me make sure.
That he was a missionary to Switzerland and Germany. So this guy was in the thick of like the business acumen of the Nazi party.
Yes, he's the one. He's the one that sent aid to the German Nazis after the war to help them with food. And if you put in, did the LDS Church send food to the Nazis after the war ended? It'll be like, no, but they sent it to the German members. And they're all baptized because they're like, we don't want to starve. But I have to tell you something. When I've been looking into some other stuff, and the Mormons used to make these movies specific for the temple, and only other Mormons could really see them. But I found a gem, and we are going to have to do a deep dive on a part 2 on the Mormon Mafia, because guess what happened? I'm going to give you a hint, but I want you to guess because I almost think you'll guess it. Think of the most random person from World War II that would make a huge difference in the world being affiliated with the Mormons. Who do you think that person was?
I mean, I'm in a headspace. I'd say like Werner von Braun or something.
And I knew you could get it. And he was in this movie that was only for Mormons, but he's in the effing movie. Like, I was like, what is happening? When I went down that rabbit hole, I was like, why is this leading to Mormons and aliens? What's happening?
The name of the movie?
I'll find it. I actually saved it on YouTube, and I have clips of it, and you can see him in the movie. And I about fell off my chair. I was like, he's going to love this. Because I know you're like really into space, and apparently I already knew everyone that's been in space is a Mormon or a Mason, same thing. But this just solidified why there was so much interaction in our space, stuff. So this is pretty wild. I was like, wow.
The movie is The Search for Truth, 1962, and there's an article that says, why was Werner von Braun in a Mormon theological film?
I have no idea why. Yeah, right. Except he was one of them.
Oh wow, this is a series
that's huge.
Just like this is so weird.
Dude, all I was doing was looking up stuff for the Mormon Mafia. I ended up in RFK, JFK, and Werner von Braun, and I went, what is happening? Why am I here? What kind of rabbit hole is this, and how do I get out? But yeah, I didn't get out. I went all the way in. It's wild.
Connection one.
It's so much.
Disney likely had their hand in this collaboration of the minds then.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I was so excited to tell you this, and I didn't want to blow it and just send you a DM because I wanted to see your face.
Wow, this is
But
wild.
yes,
This is so cool.
yes, we've got to do part 2. Now we're talking about a seance, the seance of the 9. Do you know about
Oh,
this?
here we go. Hold on. Before we talk
Telling
about Seance
you.
of the Ninth, it says right here that the director of the Search for Truth was a guy named Wetzel Whitaker, and he was a Disney animator in the 40s and
Telling you.
50s and an active Mormon. So there you go. Here's a
This
direct
is
connection.
yes, this is the article I have. Yes.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
Notably, Whitaker's the one that animated the stepsisters in Cinderella. So
So
that's
weird.
wild. He was behind the evil stepsisters.
Dude.
Is the one that made Werner von Braun part of a Mormon theological video about space.
Well, I'm just saying I think they know something. I definitely think, the also fun fact, you guys, Sirhan did not kill RFK. And the guy that probably did, Thane Eugene Caesar, he used to work for guess who? The Mormons. Oh yeah, the Mormons. And I was like, this is what? What is happening? It's so good. And I mean, he also worked for some other shady stuff that connects to Mormons, but it's always the Mormons. I'm just telling you.
Well,
And
so
yeah.
so you started talking about the George Albert Smith
Seance.
Jr. being related to the exact moment in which Mormons stopped being
Yes.
badass pirate cowboys and turned into these weird, like, straight
Bankers.
edge people. Banker. Okay, so so it was
Well,
a transition from pirate to banker, and then once you become banker, you're kind of clean cut. So now they're like white collar criminals.
so here's my thing. At the same time as the war is going on, I do believe, they were integral in the spying. We all know that the Mormons and CIA, like the Mormons are the CIA. Like, I don't know how many CIA agents aren't Mormons or at least engulfed with a lot of Mormons. So they became like integral in this whole, just like when we went into the Mormon mafia stuff, the banker E. Perry Thomas that helped like fund all of Las Vegas after the mob. He was actually in the CIA being dropped and like skiing into things like all secret spy stuff. So like all this is happening during the war. And finally, I think, George Albert Smith Jr. So not the one that was the chubby one. You'll see him. He looks crazy like a Nephilim. I'm not kidding. He's tall, and skinny. His baby picture scared me to death. Anyway, I'm telling you guys, he was the one that had his hands in everything. And no, not buggy enough eyes. Yes, down. Yes, scary guy in glasses. Up just a little. There he is with the goatee. You should see his baby photo. It terrifying. Those glasses help. His eyes, he must have had. Oh, there's the Time magazine. That's the one right there. This is what I'm talking about.
I need to find a bigger one. Yeah, his eyes are all over the place in this one.
He's got Graves' disease or something. But anyway, he also married one of the prophet's daughters, but he's super good friends with the president at this point. And that's the thing. Also, Brigham Young kind of started playing ball to make money. I still think he was like over things, but you have to understand we're running for our life. We're Mormons, leave us alone. We want to have all our polygamists. And the next thing we know, he's contacting the president of the United States saying, do you want us to help you build the railroad? Because Promontory Point, where it connects, is here in Utah. So they're not dumb and they're tired of being broke. And I just feel like it was like, look, I just can't keep doing this over and over and over again, running away. So they were like, no more polygamy, no more weird stuff. We're going straight lace. We're going to be in the CIA and stuff and like be bankers.
This is really wild too. It says that this guy, George Albert Smith Jr., was one of the principal developers of SWOT analysis. I don't know if you're familiar with SWOT analysis, but this is like a high level version of making a chart of like pros and cons, whether or not to do something. So yeah, you organize all of the possible outcomes of a decision into these 4 categories: strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. And that's what SWOT comes from. And this was somewhat popularized in the Silicon Valley show. They had a really funny one where there's a guy that's gonna like do an Evel Knievel style like daredevil jump, and they notice that the guy has like a formula wrong somewhere and he's clearly gonna die if he does this jump. But they do a SWOT analysis on like whether or not they should tell him because he's kind of a dick. So they like sit down for like a day and they do a SWOT analysis on whether or not to save this guy's life, and then he walks in and he like catches them in the act of doing this. But anyways, this is just crazy that not
He's
only
extremely smart. He's super
he's a
uber crazy
linchpin,
smart.
and
Yeah.
he would have been smart to be the one to tell all these Mormons like, hey, enough with the cowboy shit. Let's start doing some banker stuff. Like that.
Yeah.
Those are the real cowboys. Those are the real pirates. So let's start acting the part.
Yes, and they were funding so many things at that point. You know, they started a sugar company. We can do a whole episode on this, but with the Rotary Club and the sugar company and the railroad ties, like Brigham kind of started it with the railroad stuff. And then when it gets to George Albert Smith, things go wild because, you know, we've got all this, you know, Nazi connections, which you and I have talked about. And I'm just saying that white and delightsome phrase didn't come from nowhere. Like, and the Ubermensch thing from Hitler. Like, I just think they were like, oh my gosh, we found our people. Look how smart they are. Let's be like them. Like, let's be more mainstream and not quite as crazy.
Well,
And I think that was
a two-way
it.
road. I think that's how Hitler saw it too. He saw the American eugenicist movement, and and just the industrial movement in general, assembly lines, and he was like, "You guys are onto something. If only there was someone that had like the power of like a country to enact what you guys are doing at a state level." And he did that, and we saw all of the reasons why that isn't a great way to go about it. But and I think it was both ways. Like if he hadn't lost the war and like hearts and minds war, right? It would have just been like a piggyback situation. America would have been like, oh wow, look what this German guy's doing. Let's go ahead and adopt hit. Like they would have done a SWOT analysis on what he was doing and then figured out like our version. Like for example, Hitler apparently had a picture of Henry Ford on his desk. Like that's how much he admired the American ingenuity and like this assembly line mentality and the eugenics movement. And likewise, Ford had a picture of old mustache face on his desk for a while. You know what I mean? So there was like this mutual attraction between the two. It was just when, you know, your buddy goes off the deep end and you're like, I'm not with him, right?
Not
like
me.
He drove his own car. We're not together. It kind of happened that way, but that it wasn't like that from day one. In fact, most of Germany like getting up in there was just the like the feedback we were giving them. Like we were feeding off of each other, and then they took it a little too far.
Well, I definitely think they were smart enough, and you have to remember too, this all happened because of the fact that the beet sugar, like it was beets, the worst sugar that you can have. Like this continues on, and they finally got a taste of like, look, we don't want to be dirt poor and have to move around all the time. Like, come on, you know.
What does beet sugar have to do with that?
Well, because the sugar company made them tons of money. And so they were able to start doing these bankings under Zion Bank. Have you ever heard of Zion Bank? That's who opened it.
Mormons right now?
Yes. George A. Smith.
Mormons make sugar through beets, and through the beet sugar, they get money.
They ship it out through the railroad.
This is all new information to me.
So, and they make friends with the Rotary Club, because really they shouldn't have anything to do with Rotary people because they're not Mormon. You know what I'm saying? They're dipping their toes in where they shouldn't be, and they're making friends with presidents. They're starting to be mainstream. No more weirdo wife stuff. Like if you do have extra wives, hide it. They didn't say like abandon your wives if you've already done it, but they're like, no more of this. And that is why we have the fundamentalists. That's what happened. Because the fundamentalist Mormons broke away because of this, because they were like, look, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you know? And so, yeah, that's what happened. And they got ticked. They were like, no, I'm not doing that, you know? Meh. So, yeah, that was weird.
In the show, they don't really have a reference to any of this extra context that we're going on. Like in the show, it's almost like you got the bumpkin Mormons that don't know what's going on out here in Utah, and then you've got the militia Mormons that are in on everything. And Brigham Young is at like the top of all this, but his utmost importance in the show is basically plausible deniability, where they don't. He never explicitly says that he knows what's going on, but you clearly understand that he knows that these decisions are being made, and it's all for some bigger plan. And he talks
all for the glory. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all for the glory. And so like Brigham did start it. Like you have to remember there's a reformation of the church as well. People were actually getting baptized again. Like they literally reformed the church and they did it kind of by the sword. They were like, "So do you like to live? Yeah, you should come get baptized now." I mean, they weren't very nice about it. After Joseph died, everything changed. Everything changed. So Brigham was like the one kind of messing with the government a little bit, trying to see where he could go, but he wasn't full in. He liked his wives. He wanted to, continue living like he lived, blah, blah, blah. But also the fact that, the other people down the line were watching this happen. Like, there's got to be a better way. And that's why I think George Albert Smith was the first one to really go back east, get really super educated. I think he must have been a semi genius, half a Nephilim. He looks like he's 20 feet tall. Like it's crazy. He made his place sure by marrying the prophet's daughter. He even told her, he's like, "Hey, you should marry me." And he was not attractive. And she had other prospects. And she was like, "I don't think so." And so he was like, "Well, God told me you should." And she kind of was like, "Oh man," and like he played that whole thing up and she did it. She like gave in. But I think he was super smart in that one. Like he took over, and yeah,
Does
I think
that
ever
work on
since.
if you're hitting on Mormon chicks at a bar or
Oh
whatever,
yeah.
wherever they go to meet guys?
Yeah.
Could you be
Every
like,
church.
"Hey girl, I know I'm mad ugly, but like God is saying that I'm the one. Like, and who are
Do you
you
know
to
this
question
happened to
God?"
my daughter? Do you know this literally happened to
I
my
mean, I
daughter?
assume it probably happens all the time. That seems like it would be a
Yeah.
go-to pickup line.
Yeah, he walked up to her at a crowded airport, and I blame myself because she was my most indoctrinated Mormon child. And he walked up and said, "God told me if I didn't talk to you, I'd regret it the rest of my life."
Oh
And now
my
they're
God, this is
married.
the Saturday Warrior, isn't it? Doesn't she meet her
Pre-existence.
soulmate in an
Yes.
airport?
Yes. Well, this is actually going to go into another one we need to do, and this goes into the Tom Harrison pre-existence, but you can't talk about the pre-existence if you're a normal peon. You're not supposed to be like, "Oh, I knew you in heaven," but the elites, they can. The elites of the church do. And it became very elitist. You have to understand, like by I would say the 40s, they had made their own place up on the east bench of Salt Lake City just for the top echelon of the church. And you know what they named it? Mount Olympus. No shit.
I mean,
So,
I'm on board with the naming convention for the Mormons. I think that's actually pretty cool. Like they've got such a cool backstory. Like I like pirates and I like cowboys. So
well,
it's weird that they went through this switch, but the way that you're describing it as whitewashing in order to be more acceptable to like a corporate America intelligence agency, that makes a lot of sense, especially to flip it on its head like that. And even in this show, American Primeval, they kind of show that, and I'm pose this as a question, but I assume that Mormons were always made fun of for polygamy because when the Mormon walks into this Bridger trading station and he's got like a few women with him, even though I think only one is his wife in the beginning of the show, but he's got other guys' wives with him because they're making this travel. Then everyone's like, "Hey, how many wives you got?" I heard that you have to have 12. And then someone's like, "Yeah, 12 a pop." They keep saying 12 a pop. And they're making a
no.
joke about like how much they cost too. Like, "Hey, can I buy one of your extra wives off you?" And everyone's laughing about this. And you can tell by the way the guy reacts that he's so used to this about being
He's like,
teased about being a
"Meh."
Mormon with all these wives and stuff. He just lets it like roll off his shoulders a little bit. But do you think was that always the case? Like Mormons were just always made fun of in public like that?
So literally, I remember being even 12 and still being made fun of for this. We would go to the store. My grandpa would have a few of us with him, and he would play into it. He loved to screw with people, and so he was because
He's
he
like, "These are
wasn't.
all my wives. These are my child
He
brides."
did, and actually, what he would say is, "That's my older wife, and this is my middle wife, and I was the youngest wife." And the lady
That's
was
hilarious.
totally. Well, it gets better. So she says, "Well, what does the oldest wife do?" And he says, "Well, she helps take care of the kids." And then he said, "Well, what does the middle wife do?" And he said, "Well, she goes to work." And then he goes, "Well, what does that young one do?" And he goes, "Her?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "She makes the babies." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? Like, you're killing me." and he just thought it was the funniest thing because he really wasn't born into Mormonism, so he thought it was funny.
I think that's hilarious
He was
because
wild.
what you're doing is you're leaning into the absolute worst assumption that someone could pop. They'd be like, "Look at that old guy! I bet all those kids are his wives." And he's like, "Not only are they my wives, but the youngest one's the baby maker." Like,
Yeah,
that's
she's the
crazy.
baby maker. Oh my gosh. He was a super fun person, but I only appreciated that later in life. At the time, mortified. Just mortified. But people would believe this. And even when I would travel to other places, like, I'd go to Idaho, they would be normal because like they know about Mormons. But you go any further, you go to California or somewhere. I went to see my uncle in California, and he was like in ritzy place, in California, and they're like, "You're a Mormon? Oh my gosh, how many moms do you have?" And I'm like, "You guys are so dumb." And they were dead ass. Like, this was when I was like 13. I mean, so yeah, it
So when
was.
you went through that, how did that make you feel shame, or did you feel more like they were idiots for believing that?
I feel like they were just stupid. I was like, but then at the same time, I was like, I get it though, because it's so embarrassing, like I mean, all of us have some form of shame from it. And they would lie to us and say things like, well, they only married more women because they killed all the men in the war. And I'm like, but why were they marrying 15-year-olds then? Like, she hasn't even had a chance yet. She hasn't even stepped out the door to try and find a mate. You guys are selling these girls off, right? Like, and it was just not computing. Plus the fact that, before Brigham with Joseph's day, and even Parley Pratt, like I said, he got killed for this. They were marrying other people's wives they were married. They were married. And then he's like, you look like you're my wife instead. And so this just wasn't going down good. They cut that out. I mean, but they try to gloss over all of this history because it looks bad. It looks super bad.
Well, I always
So
wonder if they just kept it to 2, do you think it ever would have been
they
an
can't.
issue? Or
They can't keep it to 2.
well,
You
what
can't
I'm
go to
just saying,
heaven.
hypothetically, what if
Oh,
the
okay.
early
You
Mormon
need 3.
church was like,
Yeah.
okay, let's say it was cut off at 3, but you couldn't have
Right.
56. Do you think it would have flown
Right.
more under the radar, or do you think it only became a fascination and something to be like, oh, I bet you got 12 wives just because of the scale of it, right? Because if it's just 2 or 3, then be like, okay, they're like a weird thruple or quadruple, but it might not be as weird as seeing like, oh, you need like
55
5
wives.
minivans just to move your wives from one place to another.
Well, and a lot of them were just abandoned. Like Brigham Young was notorious for like marrying women and like being with them once and never coming back. And I think a lot of the women back then were like, good, you do that, because they just wanted to not be married to anybody else, but also like they had to be married. So it was kind of one of those things where you're like, okay, do I want to be an old maid, but safe? Oh, this is a safe way to be an old maid. I'm Brigham Young's wife that he doesn't want to have kids with. Like, huh,
What
yeah,
about
one and done.
the you have to correct the name, the Indians, the
Oh, the
Paiute?
Paiutes? Uh-huh, the
The
Paiute, yes.
Paiutes, and we get introduced to like 4 or 5 different Indian
Shoshone,
clans in this
Paiute,
show, and
mhm.
then there's like the Wolf Clan, which is a renegade form of one of these tribes, but the Paiutes are the ones that we get introduced to first. And I'm just wondering, like, were Paiutes Mormons? Did like the Mormons ever convert them, or were
So,
they not white and delightsome enough?
well, no, the Native Americans, a few things about the Native Americans. They don't have the same curse as the curse of the Black people, first of all. And they wanted to make them more white and delightsome. And even into the 80s, even Spencer W. Kimball, who was the prophet during like when I was born, okay, so not that long ago, said to people, to all the congregation, look at our brothers and sisters, how much more white and delightsome they are now that we've like basically bought all their children and mixed their races. Like, he was so happy about it. And I'm like, okay, that's bad. And he didn't say it like that, but that's literally one of his talks he gave, that how much more white and delightsome they were.
Yeah,
So
here's the talk. This guy Spencer W. Kimball, and then
yeah, kids gross.
an apostle to the Lamanites. The Lamanites are Native Americans, I assume.
Yes, Lamanites. And so they were
All Native
cursed
Americans, or does
differently.
that
Yes.
include? Okay.
Even any brown people, not necessarily black people,
What
but
Mexicans?
I think they're Lamanites. Yeah. They're not just the black.
Peruvians? Colombians? Like
They're all,
all
yep, it's okay. They love Latin American people. But here's the thing. It's kind of scary because one thing about Mormons for sure is they're really smart or blessed with like this way that they can learn languages. And we know this by the missionaries even nowadays. So here we go. Like there's all these people that went out on these missions and they still have their houses up to this day, a lot of them, and you can go tour them and whatever, but they were out talking to the Native Americans and they learned their language. They literally learned how to speak to them and were able to talk to them. So they took Native American wives. They worked with the Native Americans, but also if they didn't do what they wanted, they would chop their heads off and hang them outside the gates of their forts and like do this crazy stuff. So like this was skipped on the show. Also, I thought it was pretty interesting that the lady chief, her name was Winterbird, and Winterbird is real. And I think the reason why they didn't bring her up as real too much is because she's a lesbian chief who had multiple wives. So maybe they converted her. I don't know. Maybe she's a polygamous lady.
interesting. I can't find anything on Winterbird.
Yes, Winterbird. Yeah, she was a lesbian chief and had multiple wives. She was inspired by that. That was the main lady. The Winterbird lady was the chief. The real chief's name wasn't that, but she was inspired by this lesbian polygamist.
Okay, here it is right
Pretty
here.
funny.
And they're talking about the lady that plays Winterbird. This is her, played by Irene Beddard. And it says, although the Shoshone tribal chief is a fictional character, she's based on a real chief purported to be a lesbian with multiple wives. So they were just like, hey, we're both on the same team here. We both want multiple
The
wives for
same
our own
thing.
reasons.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
this
They
is
were like, we
also-
get it.
This
Yeah.
is another interesting Mason connection because this is also a weird history of Albert Pike in particular, of Scottish Rite, but he also would represent Indians free of charge in court so that they could fight against the government, because for all sorts of different reasons, where they were literally getting screwed by the government for land reasons and like legal issues. So he would learn the language and give them free legal advice and even show up in court on their behalf. And he kind of became this like champion of Native Americans. So there's a weird Mormon, Mason, Native American connection amongst all this.
It's strange. Yeah, it's definitely, they definitely get their foot in the door, and if it doesn't work by hanging heads on the gate, then they just learn their language and talk to them nicer. Like that was all real. I mean, I couldn't believe that. I was like, wow, okay. But
This is
yeah,
weird too. It says that your Skeletor baby guy, the George Albert Smith
he is
Jr.,
scary. Find his
that,
baby picture.
that he was
gosh.
instrumental in
Mhm.
the foundation of the Boy Scouts of America too.
Yep, he was in everything. The Rotary Club, the Boy Scouts, he was in the one Young Leaders something. It's not the one now. It's some other thing that's kind of like Young Leaders.
Well, so he was vice
whatever.
president of the Sons of the American Revolution.
That's what it is. There we go. Yes. And then he was just in everything. Like I don't know how he did what he did. He must have been on meth. I don't even know. But yeah. And he had so many connections because he married the other prophet's wife or daughter. Then he was friends with the president, and he's friends in Nazi Germany. So he just had friends everywhere. Like, and these people all ended up on certain missions, like to England and different things. So I think they're just making Masonic connections while they're traveling. So that's a guess, but it definitely worked out for him. I'll tell you what. Yeah.
I mean, so in this particular point in time in American history, it was incredibly practical to be a Mason. And I think the Mormons probably just leveraged that same thing, because this was a time in which showing up to the right place and having the right secret password and the right handshake could get that could save your life. That could make sure that you got passage safely from one place to another. It's not like now you might get hired for the job, or maybe they like the court lets you off on something, which is I guess like a modern version of that. But this was like, you're not going to survive in this place, and there's really no other way to vet people. What are you going to like just send a random message in a bottle back to Arkansas to like ask around about someone and come back? That was like Pinkerton stuff. And they actually mentioned that in this show. They mentioned how the Pinkertons, they sort of refer to them as like these rich government payroll guys. Like, we don't have that Pinkerton money. That's kind of like one of the references on here, I think, when they're talking to just the regular American military. So that's one of the reasons why the American military doesn't have a whole lot to do about these Mormons, because they're stretched thin already. And they're not really looking to get into like an all-out war that they're likely going to lose this far away from home base.
Yeah, no, and they had made really good connections in Mexico, because remember, they were part of Mexico when they ran to Utah. So they were making connections left and right, left and right. I don't think they wanted to tussle with these Mormon people, because they were known to be quite like horrific, with what they would do, like bashing people's heads in while they slept. Like, you'll have to read more about, we'll do an episode on Wild Bill Hickman, Brigham's destroying angel. Literally, that is his name. So, yes,
this guy, he had a sick beard going on.
Yeah, Brigham's. Find it where they say that. I'm certain, because I've done a lot of research on him. He is called
the
Brigham's
word angel is not on his wiki page, but I'm sure that doesn't mean that wasn't one of his names.
Put in Brigham's.
No, there it is. Brigham's
there it is. I always bring receipts. I never say unless I know for sure, but yeah, he was something. He was quite the guy. Pretty terrifying. So, and it's funny, like, too, the weird thing is these people all are, meant out to be like these wild pioneers and this and that. But, I've been looking into my family history, because I was like, screw it. They already have my spit. I'll just get on the stupid Mormon site and look at my relatives. And so I start looking in there, and like a lot of the people that came over here that were settlers, like for the Mormon people that came with the Mormon promise, they were like royals. Like, my family's all House of Bourbon. And like, yeah, it gets weird. And like Marie Antoinette, and just, yeah. And so I'm like, why were these really rich people from England coming? And at one point they were even like, hey, you need to come home and do your job. And the guy was like, no, my like great grandpa, he was like, I'm not coming back. And he would rather live in the dirt and be poor out in the middle of dusty Utah. Weird. So I don't know. Yeah.
This
Mormon
is super
Mafia.
weird too. It says that
oh, I am covering the Mormon Mafia. Check it out.
It says that Wild. Oh, here we go. Let me just show this. Thank you, Doc Fortune, for the super chat. Have you guys ever covered the Mormon Mafia that took over Howard Hughes' empire? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We did a very brief episode.
And then I've done
who we had on. I
two
think
more.
that your
Yes.
partner came on.
Yeah, Ex Mojo. But I've
Ex
done
Mojo.
even two more past this, and I'm coming out with a third very soon, because it
And
was.
we're going to be doing one too
so
about Howard Hughes
Yes.
and all that stuff.
JFK, JFK, RFK, all that. It gets very Mormon-y up in the house.
and I was this is just wild. It says that this Wild Bill Hickman, the Brigham's destroying angel, he was also the grandfather of the Mormon Western artist Minerva.
Don't you love that name? Don't you love it?
The great grandfather of fiction author Tracy Hickman. Tracy Hickman is a fantasy author, designer of virtual reality. He co-authored the Dragonlance series and 60
there's so
other
many.
books.
Oh, the guy that invented the TV was a Mormon. There's a whole bunch of Mormons that are doing all kinds of weird stuff. And the more I study now, knowing what I know, like where I ran into the aliens, I was like, uh-oh. Like when they say they have the keys, because the Mormons always like to make this joke, not joke. They're not kidding. They say that they will be the keepers and this and that because they have the keys, the priesthood keys. And people often say, what's the priesthood keys? And they have these really vague answers. It's like, oh, it's just the right to rule over your house and stuff. No, it isn't. This is going to go into the 9. This is going to go into, really ancient Egyptian weird stuff. And we already know that Joseph loves stuff like that. So
This is so
yeah,
cool, man. So now there's a Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons
that's
link
right.
to
Doesn't
the
surprise
actual,
me.
which I guess maybe it's not that crazy because if you're known for having like 50 or 60 wives, eventually you're gonna have at least one great great grandkid that's gonna do something cool, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, a lot of kids. Yeah, for sure. It's just very strange. I mean, the whole thing where they seem to have certain knowledge and they kind of joke about it. Like if you look up the current president, current prophet of the church in Italy holding the key, like he kind of does this little nudge to the freaking Catholics like, "Yep, we got something you don't got." Like I swear to you. And maybe I'm reading into it because I'm an Exmo, but yeah, I don't know. Let's see, put in, oh, right there, down one. Yep, there he is. See him holding. Also,
He's all Nelson, right?
check the hand grip, check the grip of the key. P.S. Nope, the one that picture up that you had of the old guy with it. Yep, right there. You can get it to go bigger, but anyway, he kind of does these little things that are almost like a snuff. Like that was when they opened the one right down the street from the Vatican. Check that little handshake out. The little grip on the key.
I mean,
It's
he's doing a
close.
handshake. What do you want?
Uh-huh. Okay. I know those handshakes pretty good. That one for sure represents one I recognize, but from the Mormon church. So anyway, I'm just saying he does these little snarky things, and I swear to you, they've somehow snuck into the more powerful position. And I don't know how that occurred other than banking, possibly. So I don't know. They're powerful enough to build down the street from the Vatican, which has never happened before. So I don't know. Friends in lots of places, that's for sure.
Also interesting is that Wild Bill Hickman was it says rebaptized by proxy into the LDS Church on May 5th, 1934.
That means he's dead.
Right, but that also would have been the same year in which the Joseph A. Smith Jr., whatever that guy, the A. Smith Jr. guy, was also leading some of the charge for the Mormon Church. It's an interesting overlap. But why would they re-baptize Hickman posthumously?
They probably kicked him out. I love that the daughter's name is Minerva too. Yeah. I'm gonna leave that alone right now.
What skeletons you got in your closet, Minerva?
Exactly. But I do think it might be because, and I don't know, I haven't checked yet. Okay, on this guy, we could look at Hickman's life. I think he might have been excommunicated for his part in everything like the other guy was. So if he did get excommunicated, then they just put him right back into the church after they die. That's what they do. They did that to Hitler too.
Seems so convenient though. Like kick you out while you're alive because you're causing problems, but as soon as you die, bring you back in so that now you can claim all of the good things that you did. But then also, if someone's like, I can't believe this guy was part of your church, you could be like, oh no, we kicked him out while he was doing all that naughty stuff.
Well, that's what they did to what's his face right now from Angel Studios from that stupid movie. What is it that was a lie? Tim Ballard.
Tim Ballard, yeah.
Yeah, they kicked him out, and he doesn't really care because here's the thing: if these people actually have the second anointing, okay, let's do a fake idea here. If you did something bad and you already had the second anointing, we know this for sure. Your place has been made sure, and nothing can get you thrown out of the church except spilling innocent blood. Okay, so if that happened and you got kicked out for something else, like Tim Ballard did, I don't think they've proven that he himself killed anybody. Okay, so is he really kicked out? Is he really not a part of the church anymore if he's got the second anointing? His place has been made sure. So I don't know that it means anything. I don't know that any of it means anything unless they've killed somebody that was innocent. So it's just my opinion. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Apparently, as of 1 year ago, he was excommunicated officially.
He's chummy with the Catholics now. Just saying.
I don't. Yeah, is that an upgrade or what?
I mean, Mason's a Mason. He doesn't have to change a
Well,
lot.
yeah, but you see, out of all of the different denominations, the Catholic Church is the one that's the most explicit about not allowing Masons in. You're not allowed to be Catholic and a Mason
Mm,
at the same time.
I mean, maybe there's secretness. Maybe
Well,
secretly they
that's where
can.
Opus Dei came from. Opus Dei,
Right,
and Order
right.
of the Pug, if you want to look into like old like French theology, but the Order of the Pug was another one of my favorite versions of this. Is that when the Pope said, "No more Masons in the Catholic Church," Order of the Pug pops up, German. And here you go, Paramasonic Society founded by Roman Catholics to bypass the basically the 1738 ruling where you were not allowed to be a Mason anymore. So they did exactly everything the Masons did, except they venerated a pug. And in order to be initiated, you had to kiss the butt of a pug, which is kind of funny.
Oh boy, pucker up, buttercup, right?
They call themselves Mops, which was a German for a pug. Yeah.
That's funny. No, thank you. No.
Again,
But
God,
yeah,
God loves those workarounds. He loves it when you're like, oh, I told you not to be in a secret society, but you kind of like tweaked this for me a little bit, so you got one over on me. Go ahead, get in.
you can come. I guess you can come in now. Well, and also I wanted to say when I was looking up through all this stuff, remember we were talking about the cattle and how they were kind of rich, just to give people an idea. They were known to have $25,000 on them, not counting their cattle or anything. $25,000. Like, can you imagine back then? That's so much money. That's a ton of money back then.
Here,
Brigham knew what was up.
we got another question here, and I feel like there's multiple answers to this one. Is Mormonism a successful con that took off, or was it deliberately created by a larger organization for occult purposes?
Hmm.
I almost feel like you could say like yes to both.
Right. I think it is a two-part question because Joseph dies and they redo the church. And so when they redid the church, yes, it became a con. Yes, Brigham did that. But who didn't do that was Joseph Smith. He really did believe all the things that he said, and he really did practice occultism, and he really was like a practicing magician and a
But
moonchild. And
he
that's a
was
whole nother
also he was also conning people. Like he believed it,
or
but I think that
or
he
did
realized the
he
only way that he could like achieve certain things, like other people wouldn't care about this God that he believed in, but they definitely cared about treasure. So if you could like lead
right.
someone on about treasure, he could con them into doing his bidding, thinking that they were going to get gold at the end of this rainbow. But really, it was just like, hey, help me go and get this wife. Hey, bring me to this area so that I can share, these like
Well,
occult teachings or something.
here's the thing that I always go back to that people forget. And I think we kind of went over this a tiny bit in our Harry Potter episode, but the one thing I know for sure is they want to say Joseph Smith came from this terribly poor family and that he was basically a nobody, just this farm guy. No, they came from Salem, Massachusetts, where their family were all statesmen. And I'm sorry, but that is not a poor little guy. Like that's not true. And he spent a lot of time with his uncle Jesse. Well, where the church has all these genealogical records, that's where you're going to find this weird disconnect is they don't go back to the family in Salem often. But if you go through Jesse's line, his uncle, which is where George Albert Smith came from, by the way. George Albert Smith is Jesse's line. It shows all of them. It shows everyone. So you're like, wait a minute, I thought these were poor, insignificant little dusty farmers. No, they were, but they also lost their fortune on a bad ginseng deal. So here's the thing is I do believe that I think he was a Martinist. I say think because Dan Vogel doesn't think that, and a lot of people don't think that, but I do think that, and I don't think Scottish Rite makes any sense because you and I have spoke about the timeline on this. It doesn't make any sense. Plus, he knew somebody, Lumen Walters, that had been studying in occultism and was known as an occultic doctor, and he had just come back from France. So I think he knew some things, but also I think he knew how to manipulate people for sure. Because so did Lumen Walters. He got kicked out of the town for swindling. So
Well, I think this is a really good question too, though, about like, so okay, let's say that Joseph Smith was drinking his own Kool-Aid. He thought that he was really talking to angels and he was like into occultism and all this, but he didn't die rich, right? Even if he came from like an affluent family, he didn't die super
So
duper rich. So at a
he
certain
did
point,
his talisman wrong. He made his talisman wrong. If you look at that talisman, I've been studying all this stuff really deep, and a bunch of people say he messed it up, and that was why. So
he would have been rich
yeah.
if he would have just like carried the one, and then he would have been fine.
Well, and also he did the Abramelech. I'm telling you, I think if you read that book, The Mage, okay, I truly believe he did the Abramelin ritual and he didn't seal off the bad like you're supposed to. I think he did it wrong. I think he was doing his best, right? Like, but I don't think he was 100% adept at like knowing all this stuff. And he left Uncle Jesse and he's trying to figure it out. I think he kind of screwed himself, to be honest.
So after Joseph Smith jumps out a window and dies, what like was Mormonism already on track to becoming a huge thing with all this money, or do you think it got co-opted?
No.
Someone was like, "Hey, nice little vehicle you got here to consolidate information and networks of information across states. We should go ahead and use that for this other thing that we're doing," or was it
Yes.
actual Mormonism that did that?
No, because he didn't leave a successor. This is what caused the huge problem. He had told like 4 or 5 people, like maybe you, and it was really supposed to be Oliver Cowdery. And Oliver Cowdery's line gets crazy and weird and ends up into like a satanic type of some weird stuff of the church that isn't the actual church, but it's based on church teachings, and it gets weird. But what I'm saying is Brigham Young was never supposed to be the one. It was supposed to be his son, and his son was 14 or 13. He was a kid, and the mom was like, "Hey, we're not doing there is no polygamy. I never heard anything. I never saw anything about polygamy. That is not real." And the son was like, "Yep." And so there was already going to be a splinter there because you've got all these polygamous guys that are like, "Wait a minute. Yes, it is." So they're like arguing with Emma. Emma's like, "Screw you guys." She creates the Reformed Church with her son later. But Brigham and Oliver Cowdery kind of go neck and neck and have like a presidential debate. Well, Oliver Cowdery was super sick that day. So Brigham, they literally say, and this is what they say, and this is what they say. They said Brigham Young in front of their eyes turned into Joseph Smith and spoke like him and looked like him and literally channeled him into freaking Joseph Smith. And like hundreds of people, not just 10, hundreds of people said this happened. And so I don't know what happened there, but like, yeah, it was weird. And so that's why they went with Brigham.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, did he have like hologram technology somehow? Did people just
I
fall
think they
for
were
like a really
channeling.
bad cutout?
I think that whatever Joseph was really talking to, first of all, was not a good angel of any sort, just like John Dee. And I think possibly it had a lot of powers. Like they call their God, the Mormons call their God Elohim. Well, Elohim's a title. Elohim's not a name.
But it's plural,
Elohim.
isn't it? Isn't Elohim
It is
plural?
plural. Yes. And it means like basically extraterrestrials, things that are not of this world. And so I'm just saying it gets weird. It gets weird real fast. It gets so weird. Yeah.
Lucy was asking, do you think that Joseph Smith actually jumped out the window to his death? Do you think that actually happened?
I don't know.
Is there debate on whether or not this actually happened?
How he died. Yeah.
Many
people think that Brigham set him up. Brigham set them up to be killed that day. Yeah. And that they were literally set up so that he could take over. Many people say that. Yeah.
But he still jumped out the window.
But
right?
but his brother got shot beforehand. Like, how'd that happen? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of debate that his own people turned against him. He had been making a lot of trouble. They were sick of it. And the one thing Brigham was he had kind of that strong jaw to like, screw you people. Like he stood up to the government. He stood up to America. Right. Like he didn't give a crap. He was a leader, if nothing else. Like I don't admire who Brigham was, but I will tell you this, like, he was talking to a frog that turned into a man. Even more weird.
And then he got punched by the frog man.
He did. And the thing is, I've heard this story before on the confessional to a guy that like pledged his soul to Baal. So I'm just saying, like, this has happened before. Like, it's weird. And I just think that the people were so sick of it, but they'd also given everything. Can you imagine giving like what is your option now? Like, you leave, like, or do you finish it? Do you finish it out? Well, this guy seems like he's going to do a better job than Wimpy Cowdery. And Cowdery just seems like another version of Joseph Smith, right? Like, he's not strong. He's tall and slight. And, it was his cousin. It's his cousin anyway. So Brigham was a psychopath.
Now, is that blasphemous if you were to say that in like a Mormon temple?
Oh, for sure. Once I told my husband's mom that he didn't believe in Joseph Smith, and she's still mad at me. It's been like 12 years. So
didn't believe in that he existed, or just thought that he was just like a
full of it
person, or what?
Just full of it. Yeah. And I mean, she's still mad probably, but my husband's like, you may as well have told her I worshiped Lucifer. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like,
clearly Brigham Young was not a fan of Joseph Smith, right? Like, they were adversaries. Is that not correct?
No, they were in it together to a point. They were definitely in it together, but they were very different people. I think Brigham was sick of the trouble. I really think he was like, listen, you just need to knock it off. And I think when he couldn't knock it off with the girl thing, and like ultimately, sometimes it makes me wonder if he could knock it off, because that was his Faustian bargain with this whole thing. Like, John Dee's was sex, Muhammad's was sex, Parsons was sex, masturbation sex, like all these people had to do sexual stuff. And literally he was told by an angel at the tip of a sword that you will continue with polygamy. So maybe, I don't know, maybe this thing was like a Pazuzu, but sexually.
Right. Well, again, if the theory is that human beings are just VR helmets for angels and entities and like fallen angels and stuff, then yeah, they're like, look, Joseph, whenever I put on the Joseph Smith VR helmet, we're doing VR porn. And there's no
doing it. Yeah.
Away. Like, the only reason that we even are using you as our vessel is to get to your like multiple wives.
So and don't forget, he did supposedly get the plates, right? The golden plates until when? Until he wasn't the Virgin Scryer anymore. That was when the whole world changed. So like, none of this happened before that. Once he got married and all of this stuff happened, he's not a virgin anymore. That's when things went awry. But they did this to him for how many years until then? It was like year after year after year after year, which Martinists, they can summon demons or angels on the spring equinox or the fall equinox. And we know that this happened on the fall equinox. That's why I say he was a practicing Martinist. They practice Solomonic magic. They're practitioners. They're not just like, oh, I'm going to read about this, right? Like no, it wasn't that way. So I truly believe that. I've done a lot of research on Martinism. I have a whole episode on it. If you guys want to check it out, I did a deep dive on that. I will tell you this about it. It is a glossed over deep dive, because when you deep dive Masonry, you bastards make it so hard. Like, I will say that. There's 7,000 branches. As soon as I was like, I think I know a little bit, I'm like, screw it. I don't know anything. I don't know. So yeah, it was hard. It's really hard. It breaks into like 15,000 other things. It's so crazy. There's whoa.
Also this, I mean, this sounds inaccurate, but this is not even debatable that Masonry is so incredibly fractured that even if you're Master Mason and you meet 100 other Master Masons, they all have different thoughts and feelings on exactly what all of the teachings and the symbols really mean. And then now when you get into the York Rite and the Scottish Rite and like the 33 degrees in the Scottish, or the additional 30 in the Scottish Rite, and 13 in York Rite, each one of those individual degrees, there's also no consensus on what any of the stories or symbolism that necessarily means. You've got Albert Pike's
even the three guys, these three guys that tried to start this, they get in an argument and it goes 3 different ways. So it's the truth. Like, you literally can never get anywhere with it. It's literally confusing.
But you can follow the exact same formula through like Aleister Crowley, where Aleister Crowley becomes a Mason, and then he's like, oh, we're not on the same page. So then he joins like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and then he realizes
all kinds of trouble
that with Samuel Mathers, and they're like, hey, we're not on the same page either. So then he like forms the Thelema
I
and
liked
the
Crowley's
Thelemite.
story better because, I mean, honestly, who gets to go in full regalia down the street and be invisible and have a fight with Mathers? That was awesome. What?
But, and he wanted to tell everyone about it, and I guarantee he probably showed up to lodge like fully naked a few times, and he's doing like
Hilarious.
mescaline, and they're like,
I
"Look, you
loved
can
it.
do that stuff, but you're not supposed to do it out in public and like tell people that you're doing it and write books
He's like,
about it."
"Don't worry, nobody saw me. I was
Yeah,
invisible."
I was
And
invisible. Come on.
and then people are like, no, we just ignored you because that was weird." And so, because I mean, are you really going to engage the guy in full regalia going down the street with his wand? Are you really going to go say hi? Nope, you're going to turn the other way. Like, you're just going to be like, not today, Satan. So, but again, like you said, with Thelema, once he gets to Thelema, where did he get the idea from? Oh, that's right. He's in Egypt on his honeymoon, doing lots of fun honeymoon stuff, and then talks to Awas. And what did Awas do? He told him to write a damn book, and the book became a religion. Sound familiar? Like Scientology, like Mormonism, like all of it, like Muhammad, like all of them, John D, all of them. It's all of them. Just
I know
saying.
that it seems like that is the theory that you're somewhat developing in real time here, is that whatever
Telling
John
you.
D summoned is the same thing that Joseph Smith summoned and that Aleister
Maybe not
Crowley
the same,
summoned.
but
Or
yeah,
they all know each other. Like they all
they
have
do.
beers together in like some weird demonic bar.
And they're like, "Did you see what I made Joseph do? His wife is pissed." Yeah, they're doing that. Brigham pushed him out a window. But yeah, no, I totally believe it. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but crazier things have happened. And honestly, if you follow a lot of the religions and how they started Scientology, how did we get jet engine propulsion? I don't want to explain that. How about the supercomputer? That's a fun one. We're digging again. We're digging just like we're digging for plates, right? I'm just saying, like, I have heard so many weird things now that I'm like, that is not real. When I was a normie, I was like, that isn't true. And then you look it up. How did Carrie Mullis figure out how to do the PCR test? Oh, he did mushrooms and he went surfing and he woke up because he hit his head and it was on the side of his car. Cool. Okay, that's the freaking real story. It's not a conspiracy. That's the Wikipedia. Go look up the Wikipedia. It literally says he woke up and it was on his car.
Who was this?
Carrie Mullis, the inventor of the PCR test. How did he find the PCR test equation?
This was also the story of how they discovered the double strand helix shape was after taking like LSD, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's so strange that I'm like, what? Or like Seymour Cray and the supercomputer and the gnomes under his house, or I don't know if they were elves. I can't remember. They're little things he's talking to. So
Yeah, Mullis got the idea during a night drive in the California mountains. Yeah, exactly what you're talking
No,
about. And even Steve Jobs, I think.
He visited a yogi in a cave that had no mother or no father and got the iPhone. This is all real. And that's why I'm sick of, like, when you tell people some of this stuff, right? Like, they're like, "You're a liar, you're a conspiracy theorist." I'm like, look it up. Look it up. Like, what are you talking about? I didn't make this up. This is too weird for me to make up. Like, I'm not that good, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. But I think there was something to Joseph. I really do. I don't think Brigham was real. I don't think he believed it like that. I think he was like extra wives, some money, leadership. Sounds like a good idea.
So that's interesting then. So Joseph Smith drank his own Kool-Aid, but you think Brigham Young maybe was not into the Kool-Aid, but he was like, "Oh, I can make this work for me."
Yeah, I think he was smart enough. I think he was very smart. I think he was smart enough to watch. Maybe if he was into it at first, he saw the trouble that this was causing Joseph and even Oliver Cowdery. He had a lot of problems. And so I think he was like, this looks like not a good idea. Maybe we can
Brigham
harness.
Young had the Bloodstone amulet, right?
So he did. He did believe in some things, but I think I'm saying it wrong. Maybe the thing is he just hid it, right? It became more occultic under Brigham because he got smart. He's not going to throw it out there and be like Joseph was, who was just like, screw it, let's go. He was like the dumb cowboy part of it, I swear. And then Brigham was like the brains of the operation, like, hey, maybe we should keep this to ourselves. Like, this seems like a bad plan, and they keep killing us. Like, stop it. And so I think he was just sick of it. I think he was so sick of it, but he was a horrible racist asshole. I'm not coming to his defense on any of
Yeah,
that.
so he formalized the prohibition of black men attaining priesthood in the Mormon church. So he was actually like, look, we're
He
not
was
going to dance
horrible.
around this anymore. We're going to spell it out for you.
Yeah, he was bad. Yeah. So he is quoted by saying, if you find your wife with a black man, better to run them both through with your sword than let them live. So, I mean, he was something. He was horribly racist, where actually Joseph Smith wasn't. That was another thing. He was an abolitionist. Like, I think there was a lot going on there that got him killed. Two things absolutely got him killed. Number one, he let women in the club. Okay. Masons aren't supposed to do that. They have their own club. You have your own club. Like, you're not supposed to go to the club together, right? Like, you got separate stuff. And so I think that was not really well accepted. But I think Brigham was like, seems crazy, but we'll do it. Like, I feel like he was just like, ugh. And then Joseph's like, no, this seems like a great idea because Emma's up his ass, and she's just like one of those wives. I'm telling you, she was. And so I think he went along with that one. But then he's like, and maybe we're going to baptize this black guy. That was it. I think Brigham was like, he's going to die now. Like, we're done. We're not doing that. And so, and he did do that. He did.
Is this fair? Is this pro-Mormon, ex-Mormon? Like, what is this? Are they the official response of the Mormon Church?
Which part?
It's called Fair Latter-day Saints. And it says
no, okay,
faithful answers, informed responses.
I think basically what they are is supposed to be impartial. I go there all the time. It's supposed to not be for or against, but it's like the lightweight version of going against the church. Basically, they're not going to talk about magic in there. That's for sure.
Well, it's interesting because on their website, they have a whole section dedicated to was Brigham Young a Mason? And it says, yes, Brigham Young, along with many other men in Nauvoo, is how you say Nauvoo, joined Masons at Joseph Smith's encouragement. But it's weird that it specifically says, I don't know why they say this, but it specifically says that he was not a 33rd degree Mason because the 33rd degree did not exist. He was
in Blue Lodge. Yeah. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you guys look anything at Lumen Walters, which is also kind of interesting that they really hide him in the history, even though he is Joseph Smith's wife's cousin. So, like, why are they hiding him so deeply when he is literally a huge part of Mormonism? But yet they do, because he's the occultic side of things. And literally they say that. They say he was ran out of town because he was a horrible occultist that swore too much. So,
what is the most occult sect of Mormonism? Is it the Warren Jeff clan, or is there something? Is there like a Martinist?
There's worse. We need to do one on this one. There is an actual faction of fundamental LDS people, and they believe they are actually the blood of Jesus Christ.
What do they call it? Do they have a special name?
Yes, they are the. Why can't I think of it right now? I'll think of it in 5 seconds. Give me a minute. But yes, and they support everyone. They support all of like Mitt Romney. They've given, they're super rich and they marry like their moms and their sisters and their brother. They keep their blood.
Are there any Mormon groups that you can join and they're like, hey, we read the Magus here. Make sure you bring your copy of the Magus to the temple. And we're going to be learning how to do all these sigils and John D, like openly discuss the ceremonial magic stuff.
No, there's no way. No, they don't. They don't do that. But here's the thing: unless they're doing it in the temple, which you wouldn't know unless you were one, because they're not going to let you in their temple. They're serious about it, and so it's the Kingston clan.
The Kingston clan. See, there needs to be like a Crowleyan Mormonism, like someone that's like, I'm going to go do it.
the Kingstons believe that Jesus Christ had children with Mary Magdalene and that their bloodline is Jesus Christ. So that one's fun. But yeah, they marry their sisters.
Okay, see, this is where it gets really confusing for me. Latter-day Church of Christ is what a code word for the Kingston movement, because the
Well, that's
trustee
because the
is
Church of
Kingston.
Christ was the original name of the LDS Church. It was called Church of Christ. It was. And so they keep it closer to normal. And honestly, you wouldn't know. You know how Warren Jeff's clan, if you look at Warren Jeff's clan, you will see like, and they're all dark haired but white skinned. I think they're probably more of the Welsh ones, but I can't prove that. I'm just saying from their looks, they have the darker hair and but the really white skin. And that's not normal. Like the Jeff's clan is all blue eyes, blonde hair, white,
Well,
white. Minerva.
Kingston's
Yep.
mom's maiden name was Minerva.
I'm telling you. But here's the thing is they're the ones that are like my mom's, my grandma. Like it's weird. And it got so bad, you know, they're really rich and they actually had to hire a geneticist to help them have their children without all the issues. And so they have held people hostage. They're a great ride. We need to do a show on the Kingstons. They
Now,
have a
is this because they
shootout.
came from Arkansas or because they were Mormon?
No, they're just weird. I don't even know. It gets weird and they are really violent. They do not wear the Little House on the Prairie clothes, but they do wear like this dress would be acceptable because it goes all the way, well, it needs to be a tiny bit longer because I've got long arms. All the way down, they wear the long underwear, you know, underwear. So but they wear jeans. The girls can wear pants. And I lived close to one of these factions when I lived. So I lived in St. George for a time. That's where Warren Jeff's clan is. And then I moved to Cedar City and that's where the Kingstons are. So they kill their kids if they don't, you know, there's a lot of problems if you're marrying your sister. All right. And if they have babies like that, they're born at home and nobody's the wiser. And they have a lot of baby graves out there. So they
But you
just
didn't finish that statement, though. They kill their kids if what?
if they're not quite right.
Oh, okay.
If
Okay.
because you married your sister, you know. And a lot of these women are I've actually talked to multiple people that were in the Kingston clan and there's shows out on this. They like keep people hostage, drug them, all kinds of stuff. They were actually indicted and I low key feel like I knew somebody that was involved in this. But anyway, they were indicted for these fake tax deductions. They're very involved in the government. They're very involved in backing because they have a lot of money. And they had this fake tax credit scam for like energy credits or something. And it never really existed. Like they built the building and made it look legit and everything. And they gave it a phone number and then they just didn't do anymore. They were like, okay, it's good enough. Yeah, we're making some kind of renewable energy BS. And it was just a huge Ponzi scheme.
This is like how Enron came up.
Yeah, it was exactly like Enron. Yes.
Well, what were the other fact versus fictions things that you had for this American
Oh, let's
Primeval
see if I
series?
have any more. All right, let's see. We talked about the Native American chief. We talked about all of the characters like that lived, like Abish and Sarah and Isaac. None of those people were real. None, zero. Jim Bridger was real, and he's actually super interesting. And he really did take a buyout, and they really did burn it to the ground. So, yeah, they did that because they said they did not want the Mormons to take it over, and they didn't want to have to deal with not the Mormons, the army coming after them. So they burned it to the ground. And the army was like, screw you, and built it back within a year. So they took it back over. So Bridger was built back up within the year and taken over by the US government.
They have a description from the time of Bridger. It says, at least 6 feet tall, straight as an Indian, muscular, a quick in movement, not nervous or excitable, probably 160 pounds, with eye piercing as the eye of an eagle that seemed to flash fire when narrating an experience.
Eye piercing. Wow. I think he went blind at the end of his life, so that's kind of funny. But he had 3 different wives, all of which were Native American, not at the same time. They passed away. And I think he was just over it. He did not know how to read or write, but actually he knew how to speak like 12 different languages. Even though he was illiterate, he knew he was a polyglot. So
Right,
it was
including
interesting.
like all these Native American languages that got him
Mhm.
over. And it also
Yep.
says, this is crazy, that in 1830, Bridger and Associates purchased a fur company from Jedediah Smith. And Jedediah Smith, if you've ever seen The Simpsons, Jebediah Springfield, the guy that's like in the middle of the town square that they're always messing with the big statue, that's basically Jedediah Smith that they're making fun of there. So this Jim Bridger guy is somehow connected to the Simpsons. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, he's very connected to Bridger. There's a whole story with him and also that the bear. Yep, you're getting to it. So, he stayed with a guy
His bear's like
dying.
a dog.
Yeah, he didn't even care. He's like, whatever, I'll stay with the guy. But he was not scarable. That's why when Brigham Young came multiple times to try and mess with him, he's like, okay, and do it. Like, I just think he didn't care. He was a little crazy. So, in a good way. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know this. It says in 1846, the Donner Party came to Fort Bridger. So they actually stopped off there before. So this is, I mean, maybe that's one of the nods is that this lady in the show, American Primeval, was actually on her way along the exact same route as the Donners.
Mm, ew. I mean, that's harsh. Uh, I'm not sure, but they did say it was kind of made up. But like I said, I kind of wondered, like, too, on the kid that became Isaac, like where he was obviously like this white guy that lived with them. A lot of Mormon children did end up like they ended up kind of intermingling in general with wives and kids and different things. So
Well,
I wondered
his
if
three
that
wives
was a
were all
nod.
Native American too. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was telling. They all died. They didn't. He wasn't a polygamist. He had a wife. She died.
Right.
Another one died of childbirth, and then
Yeah, first
So
the Flathead tribe, then a Shoshone chief's daughter, and then another Shoshone chief's daughter.
you would think you wouldn't give him anymore. Like if you're the chief, like you'd be like, you keep killing him, so I don't know if I want you to take my next daughter. I would not. I would not want that to happen. But yeah, and he had like a whole bunch of really sad stuff about his kids too, which was sad. But yeah, he eventually did really take the cell out and went like, "Peace out, bitches." Like he didn't care. So yeah.
It is crazy just seeing how cowboy these dudes were back
Oh,
then,
he's in
right?
Wyoming. Have you ever been to Wyoming? It's I'm in a
I have
and
not.
Donut
No, I've seen
Donut
pictures.
came to Utah and didn't say hey. I thought the Mormons got him and he was staying. I was like, uh-oh.
Well, he did go to
Send
Hawaii
out a
right after that, and that is a known sort of travel path, right, for
It
Mormons
is.
as they end
I
up
was
in
like,
Hawaii.
send help for Donut. Send help. Donut. No response on the coffee. They got him off the coffee. I don't know. I was like, let's go get a coffee. No response. I'm like, uh-oh, they got him. He's
What's
not
this?
drinking
Someone
coffee.
mentioned an offshoot Mormon cult
Oh,
called the Daybells.
I've
Is that
told you
is that
about the
someone's name?
Daybells. No, we have to talk about the Daybells someday. I have interviewed the aunt of the Daybells, the kids. She
Oh,
was the
this is
one.
the murder case.
Yeah, yep. We need to do one on that now that it's been decided. Remember, we kind of waited because it was sketchy. So yeah.
The Daybell Doomsday Murders. Yeah, that sounds
Yes,
like
it
a good.
was. Yep. And I know a whole bunch about this one because I did interview with the niece or the aunt of Tylee and JJ. So, and she's really nice, but it was really sad too. So,
Oh my God! It
uh
says last seen on September 8th.
oh. Oh boy.
What happened 3 days after that? I wonder.
Well, actually, do you know they had circles around where the kids were dead? So, magic, like purposeful circles. Yeah. There's a whole thing. We've got to get into that. That's the Tom Harrison thing that I was telling you about one day. Visions of Glory cult. And it's scary. Yep. Yep. We're gonna
Well, I
have to
love
do
it.
a deep.
What
Yeah,
did
we've
we
got
miss
so
any
much
other
stuff.
fact or fiction on the show, or did you
Um,
get through all your notes?
let's see. Just so people, if they want to know like the more grueling parts of this case, Blood of the Prophets, again by Will Bagley, was a lot of where I got my information from to deep dive on it, and that's a good book to check into. So I think other than the truce, that the truce was called, and that they were known how much money they actually had and everything on them. They were literally killed for what they had, for the money that they had. Eliza Young speaks of it. So it's not an accident, even though the church would like to say that it was. And to save bullets, they bashed a lot of the kids' heads in, just so you guys know. So yeah, it was grueling, very grueling.
It's just a
And
fun show to
yeah.
put on with the family and learn about Mormonism.
Oh my gosh. And the church is pissed because we didn't show all that, part with the bashing in, and I don't know.
So in your mind, does American Primeval does it do a service for the Mormons or against the Mormons? Like, is it helping whitewash some of it, or do you think that it's uncovering or like, bringing up old stuff that the Mormon church would prefer no one even talked or thought about anymore?
I think there is a looming there's a looming cloud about the Mormon massacre. We all know about it because they've even made, like, if you put in the site for the Mormon massacre, it will come up. There's like a place you can go visit. It's in southern Utah. All this stuff. So people know about it because they've had to do something, right? They've had to like address it somehow. Like, let's make it a memorial. Let's make it a little better. It's not better. And people kind of know, but they also don't talk about this. Like, if I were going to go have this conversation with my mother-in-law, I just would not, I would not have that conversation with my mother-in-law.
So yeah, if you go there, they got a little pile of rocks. So
Yeah.
that's their way of being like, our bad. Here's a pile of rocks to make
Here's
you feel
some
better about it.
rocks. Yeah, sorry about it. Let alone what they, have done to other people. And it's just, it was a bad time.
Like,
Like, I mean,
each rock
settling.
represents a person, or what?
I don't even know why they did the pile of rocks. I just have been there and went, ugh, this isn't good. But yeah. And the native people just have been screwed over with it too. Like, I just feel like the Mormons can't get away from it, so they just had to do something.
Did they really wear bags on their heads?
They tried to pretend like they were Native Americans, so they were
Not a
dressing.
single one was like, hey guys, I've never actually seen an Indian wearing a bag on his head. Maybe this isn't the best outfit.
I think they were just trying not to be seen, but there were a few people. There was actually a girl that escaped that did have memories of this and was returned to her family in Arkansas. I think her name was Virginia. And that was an interesting story. She is where we get a few things from, but she was very young. I think she was maybe 5 or something when that all went down. John D. Lee also is a good one to search into if you guys are wanting to find out what exactly happened there and how Brigham Young threw his own son under the bus. So that was pretty bad. Yeah, it was bad.
Is
So.
this the worst thing that the Mormons have done relatively? Like, if you were to like pick the top one thing, would it be in the Mountain Meadows massacre, or are there others that are of equal like shocking history?
I think for blood, like probably this, like not for like swindling or like, because we could do some episodes on the different money issues that they've ran into. There's been some very scandalous things there
Okay,
that
but
probably
like in
hurt a
terms
lot
of
of
like
people.
one-off tragedies, the Mormon
Yeah.
9/11 was only like 120 people.
It was pretty well, yeah, that we know of, right? I mean, at once, we'll say it that way. And it
Right,
also took 20 years for anybody to be punished. 20 years.
but hear me out. They only did this one time. There was only one Mountain Meadows massacre,
Blood
right?
atonement. Somebody brought up the blood atonement, and they did castrate. Yeah, they did do these things, but I don't know
But
the thing
what does
about.
castration have to do with anything? Who was castrating people? The
Oh,
Mormons?
Brigham Young. Brigham Young to castrate the younger people so they wouldn't take their wives. Yeah. The kids, the Mormon sons. Yeah. This was real. But here's the thing. The blood atonement to me is a little bit different because the blood atonement, they kind of agree. Like it's so disgusting, but they do. They're like, yeah, do it. I'm a bad person. Like even the guy that one of the cases that was really well known in the blood atonement cases is in Cedar City, last name Anderson. If you put in Anderson blood atonement case, he literally, they helped dig his own grave and like went and kneeled and let him do it. And he was like, yep, get it done. And I was like, oh my gosh. But like, I feel like that's a little less bad because they're like, yeah, I got it. It's got to be what's got to be done. It's got to be done. Like, but I don't know.
Well, this is wow. This is one of the quotes. It says, "It was better to kill a man in faith than to let him damn himself." So this was part of that
remember
mentality.
Well, you've forgotten my famous quote from Brigham Young, and I know we've talked about it before, but what does Brigham say? Do you love your neighbor enough to kill him? Because some sins cannot be atoned for on their own. And will you love your neighbor enough to spill his blood? That says it all.
Wow. Yeah, it says right here, Warren and others stepped out from the willows. So Warren is the guy that was possibly going after one of Brigham's wives. And it says, or Lewis was. They pulled Lewis from his horse, dragged him into a brush, and emasculated him in a brutal manner. That's one way of phrasing it. And then it said that the victim was lying on a snow-covered ground described as a bitter cold night, and he laid there near senseless for 48 hours before being found by someone who
that
took him
probably
and saved his
saved him.
life.
Do you know what? The ice, honestly, as a nurse, I will tell you that probably is the only reason why he didn't die. Because it would stop the bleeding. So, yeah. Sorry. Ugh. But yeah, Brigham was brutal. They didn't call him Bloody Brigham for nothing. That's his nickname. So, there's some major atrocities. And, you have to remember too about that sugar company I'm telling you about. Literally, they said, we do not care if this breaks the church. And you might be Mormon if you are here and you're at church and doing all the things, but you're no saint if you don't help build this sugar company.
The Utah, Idaho Sugar Company. Is that what we're talking about?
And I'll tell you, they really pushed it. They pushed it to the point where they were like, you are not a saint if you do not come help do this for free. Now, do not forget that also the railroad was the same way for the Mormons. These people were used as slaves. Their own congregation was used for slaves. And so they did all of this work for free. And that is how the rich got richer. They're not dummies. Yeah.
Oh yeah, notable stockholder of that sugar company was this George Quayle Cannon.
Yes, George Q. Cannon. Yes,
apostles. So
everybody calls him George Q. Cannon. Yep. And this is where they start. Look, he's in Congress. This is where they start leeching their way. This is how they start leeching their way into government and stuff and getting chummy with the presidents and all this. But remember, this was all built on the backs of people like my great-great-grandparents for free. And they didn't really care and they didn't really help them. Like they were pretty poor people and it's sad. So
he was the first missionary to focus teaching natives in Maui.
They are, you don't even want to go to Hawaii right now. It ties into Mormon mafia. It's a whole deal. It's a situation. They like to go
I think I'm fine. Just for the record, I'm cool with Mormons. You're the one that screwed up. You're in with the Mormons.
Oh no. I mean, we can't go there because it will be an episode. We need to do it will take a full episode to talk about Hawaii because Hawaii was infiltrated by the Mormons extensively through Howard Hughes and the Mormon Mafia. So yes. And the Polynesian Center that is there for the LDS Church was built by the Mormon Mafia. And so
kudos to that genius Mormon that was like, hey guys, like you go off to Uganda, you can go to Maine or whatever. There's these guys that really need our help in Maui. They just happen to be by the beach. Wow. There's some really nice pina coladas there. Like, you need to send me there. That's where I
Yeah.
need to be, is in
Well,
Hawaii.
and he was like, hey, it's okay. They're just brown. They're not black. They're just brown people. And I will tell you this, there is a huge population in Utah of Polynesian people. Huge Tongan and Samoan people that are all LDS here. Huge. They overtook that whole colony basically before it was ever even on the board for anybody else. They're like scooping it up. Same thing with Latin America. They're like, "Oh, nobody wants you. We want you. We love you. Like come here. Let's and the thing is they're really family oriented people usually. So it's an easy sell. They're like, "Hey, don't you want to be with your family after you die, you bad person? Like don't you want to be with them kids?" And so they do this kind of stuff. They do. And it's sad. It's really sad.
This one's interesting. This is a picture called Polygamists in Prison. And
Yes,
it's just
they
got a
were.
bunch of Mormons that had multiple wives that got sent to prison.
Yes.
Look, they're like
Yes.
suits. It's like a 3-piece suit,
Yeah.
but it's all barred. The guy even has
That's
a
hilarious.
bow tie fashioned out of this.
Well, they did their best, right? Like they were getting prosecuted and persecuted and for a while, for a time, and then they stopped. And then the only time I'm saying, like, here's the thing nowadays. If you want to be a polygamist, like knock yourself out. But here's the thing. You can't be a polygamist with a 12-year-old, sickos. So let the people, Warren Jeff's dad let them be 18. I obviously know my sister's husband is the nephew of Warren Jeff's. Like, and also related because they're double related. He also married Rulon Jeffs, which is Warren Jeff's dad, daughter. So it's like a double in. And he said, look, when Rulon was over the church, it was totally different. He let everybody get to 18. Yeah, you still didn't get a whole ton of choice, but you kind of did. It was like, okay, we've got a word from God and you're supposed to get married to this guy. And they're like, when? And they're like, in 2 hours, make your decision. So that's kind of thing that they did, but like still you're over 18. So you know what adults do, like fine. But when you're doing this stuff with 12-year-old kids, you're disgusting. So that's bad. And otherwise I'm like, if these people back in the day were doing this and everybody was like, cool, this is what we want. Like, whatever, leave them alone. Like that part doesn't bother me. Everybody thinks I'm an ex-mo because everybody found out Joseph Smith was a polygamist. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care about that. I'm way more interested in his occultic shit. Like, honestly. So.
And here, there's maybe for a parting quote, but this is George Q. Cannon's response to the Supreme Court upholding the ban on polygamy, essentially. So this is what 1879 Reynolds versus United States. I guess this is the Supreme Court decision which solidifies no polygamy. And he says, and this is him being like, oh, I'm the victim here. He says, our crime has been we married women instead of seducing them. We reared children instead of destroying them. We desired to exclude from the land prostitution, bastardly, and infanticide. If George Reynolds is to be punished, let the world know the facts. Let it be published to the four corners of the earth that in this land of liberty, the most blessed and glorious upon which the sun shines, the law is swiftly invoked to punish religion, but justice goes limping and blindfolded in the pursuit of crime. So that was his like mic drop moment for like, you guys suck.
Well, and to Green-Eyed Crow's point, there are a lot of cool Mormons, but I think especially here in Utah, they look down their nose on you if they can't convert you. Yeah. Wait until you're an apostate. Wait until you're the apostate and you went through the temple and you're like, nah, bro, they hate me. They hate me. And my kids can't play with
I'm convertible. I am highly convertible because I want to make sure that like, I want to be attainable for the Mormons. If they feel like they can convert me, I feel like they'll be nice to you.
You will never, unless you go through the temple and get out, then and say, screw all of this, I'm going to tell everything or whatever. Or even if you don't tell everything, you're just like, screw that. Like, that's the only way they're going to be like, no, you can't play anymore. You're still savable. But here's the thing, like, ultimately, These people in the middle, and I feel this way, and I don't know if these viewers know because it's been a long time since we've chatted about this. There is and I'll bring receipts when we do the Rotary Club episode, but there is a faction inside the faction, inside the Quorum of the 12. There is a special affairs committee that runs inside the Quorum of the 12 that doesn't have to answer to anyone in the church. And they are the ones that go out and do a lot of things that are pretty sketchy. And they are the ones that are like CIA government type weird stuff, getting involved in all of this. And, it's always, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Do I think my husband's mother does know about this weird stuff? No, she is the nicest freaking lady. Like, I'm really not saying these people aren't kind, nice, good people. Like, honestly, most of them are really great people. But at that top echelon, you have to know that the things that you're doing, and as a Mason, you know this, if rituals didn't mean anything, people wouldn't do them. Rituals mean something, but not only here in the ether. And that is why they call their God Elohim. And that is why I am upset, because they are stealing those people's loosh. And if they came out and said, you know what, we're like a pagan religion, and you can keep this loosh for yourself, or gave it freely, whatever, and weren't just lying to everyone, I think I wouldn't care. But like, they're lying to them. It's gross to me. Like, that's horrid. You don't do that to people, in my opinion. So,
Well, that's
yeah.
your opinion, and that's why they don't want you anymore, and they want me.
I know. But are you good with doing, rituals for somebody that you don't get the benefit from?
Absolutely. I was in the military. Are you kidding me? That's the entire premise of the military.
Oh,
Doing
I
blood
mean,
rituals for a small group of guys, and you've got no idea what the real intent is. That's all it is.
but you don't care that doesn't come back to you in any way, form, or fashion, or to your children, or to your families?
They'll forgive me. That's kind of like the whole thing about Christianity is like you get there and they're like, "Are you sorry?" And you say yes, and like, "All right, get in."
Yeah, I'm the type of person where I'm like, if you want to do anything you want to do, and you are knowledgeable about it enough, right? Enough to know, like, you may not know everything when you pledge to be a Mason, but you know that you're going to be a Mason, and you kind of know that it's got some sketchy backstory. And if you really want to look it up, it's all out there, right? Whatever. Like, if you want to do that as an adult, you're not hurting
You
anybody
got to
like
kill a
that.
few kids. I want that parking spot. I'm sorry.
No, not that. If you're not hurting anyone and you are literally just practicing what you believe in, then fine. But the moment that you're starting to hurt other people, whether it's in this ether or not, I feel like that's just so deceptive, like, and not good. Like, that's just me,
It's a fine line though, because then you could say like, okay, well, what if all you ever did was sent $100 in once a year? Are you doing anything bad? Well, what if you knew that some of that $100 went to like a mercenary crew that went and like took out an entire village of innocents, and then you gave $100 the next year? Like, at what point are you guilty? And if you've got any organization that has lasted more than a century, right? You could probably point to one horrific thing that they did, and then you could be like, well, if you've even given them a penny since that horrible thing happened, then you're just as culpable of
True,
anything else, right?
true. But we're talking about people's like existential existence. Like, we're talking about, they are dealing with things that they don't even know what they're doing. Like, if I went up to somebody and said, do you know what the Abramelin is here in Utah, out in the streets? Like, I have one book place that I can go to where she's like, I know what you want, because she's a pagan or something. And she's really nice. And she knows that I'm looking for weird stuff. But like anybody else, they'd be like, oh my gosh, this girl. Like, they would be like, the other day, one of my books had a Nazi thing on it, and it almost got delivered to my old neighbors, and they're Mormons. And I was like, oh, Amazon, you almost screwed me so bad. Like, you cannot mess up my package. I actually went out there and got it from him. I'm like, hey, bring my book back. Because I already knew, and the thing is, even if I told them, like, hey, this is what you're really doing, and this is hurting you, your family, your posterity, blah, 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 they would still get mad at me. So how do you fix that?
Well, again,
Yeah.
it's an interesting difference, right? Because on one of these examples, it's like you're having people do Abramelin rituals without even realizing it and stealing their loose energy, and how horrible is that? You shouldn't be doing that. But we're also this is like in juxtaposition with this American Primeval, where they weren't like secretly getting to do Abramelin rituals. They were like, hey, put this bag on your head and go kill 120 people that don't deserve it. And these, like, out of those two, I almost feel like having people do a secret Abramelin ritual is the lesser of those two evils.
Oh, I had to put that one up there. I'm just saying, like, I think that if you're going to mess with things, you at least have the right to know. I think that in Joseph's day, they probably knew a lot more. I think he was probably a lot more honest. In Brigham's day, I think he locked it up, locked it down, and made sure that was going to the people at the top. And then everybody's ignorant in the middle. It's just like the Nazis. Like, no wonder him and Hitler got along. Like, they're like, what? We're just doing our job. We're the brown shirts or whatever. I just feel like Mormons are the brown shirts of the world, and they don't know it. Right? They don't even know. They don't even know what that is. They probably really don't. They're so busy. They are so busy. They got so many kids, and they're always going to church, a million things and everything. I don't think they have any time to study anything like this. And then on top of it, if you did as an active Mormon, you would be in deep shit. So,
Well, I don't
yeah.
think Mormons are brown shirts, especially not the Jeff's clan, who are sponsors of this
Oh
show.
my gosh.
Anyone that
Oh, I
sponsors the
thought it was
show is
the
never going to be a
Kingstons.
brown shirt. Well, they
Yeah.
all are. Whoever sends me
Yeah.
money doesn't get to be a brown shirt. That's how it works, though. But
Yeah,
yes,
I
I
think
do plan on joining all of the cults. I am actually planning on maybe doing a deep dive into Heaven's Gate and maybe trying to join Heaven's Gate, although I probably wouldn't eat the applesauce, but otherwise the rest of it seems kind of cool. And the castration
you like
thing.
the
No
outfits. Yeah.
applesauce, no castration,
The
but
Nikes are
outfits and,
cool.
and working in
Yeah.
like computer sites and talking about aliens. That actually sounds kind of cool.
I mean, the aliens thing, right? Like, and that's the thing. They keep so much secret. And I'm like, boy, I wonder if they would have an uptick, like you've said before, in joining if they just like let it out of the bag. Like, and they were just like, guess what? Guess why so many people were named Minerva?
I do.
Like,
Honestly, I feel like there has to be one of
ooh,
those sects out there. Maybe they just don't have a good PR arm, but there's got to be one that's like, look, Joseph Smith talked to a frog. We believe it. We also believe that he read the Magus. Here, when you join our specific sect of Mormonism, we give you an honorary Mormon version of the Magus, and we teach you how to read it. Like, that has
I
to
think
exist.
that's
It
better.
doesn't in
I think
mainstream.
that's better. You know what? I think that's better because then at least you know what the hell you're doing. Maybe they'll do it right this time, right? And lock down. Maybe he could at least get the talisman right because he did that wrong.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
gonna talk to Jacob Isbell, and I'm gonna talk to
Jacob,
Andreas and maybe
love
Extra,
it.
maybe one of them, because they are in the unique position to introduce something like that. I think Andreas might be a little bit more open to it, so we'll see.
Andreas should because I mean, he's right at a point where that would fit in with everything he's doing. Like, honestly, the 9 ain't nothing for Andreas. Let's just say that. He already believes in a lot of that stuff. And Scientology, yeah, exactly, exactly. There's a lot of parallels with Scientology and Mormonism. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
So
there is a never-ending stream of things that we can talk about on this show. It was just wild that this show even popped up. This
I
American
know.
Primeval show came up, and it was about all the things that we've already kind of talked about, and now it's becoming slightly more mainstream, right?
Everybody is watching this show. I have had so many people contact me, and it's just I get it because like it is a pretty. I mean, overall, we
It's a
watched the
great
show.
show.
It was a
It's like
great show. Except the lady, I just have to say this. That lady was an idiot. Like after you didn't do what the guide said at least twice, Like,
Right.
come on, you moron. Like, who keeps doing that if you care so much about your kid that you're not going to listen to the guy who does this for a living? Like, stop it,
Yeah, she's a
idiot.
little bit of like a plot mover. Like she's there for the story to
Mhm.
follow some sort of
How he fell in love
thing.
with her when she's a moron, I don't know. Like, I'm like, she seems like an idiot, but I
And I
guess
realize it's
whatever.
late, but she was like I can't remember the name of the character, but she was like the Miss America character in the Glow series about the female wrestling squad. Like that's where you might, if you see her and you're like, oh, she looks familiar, it might be from that Glow series.
Right, maybe, yeah. I didn't think she looked familiar, but I don't watch
Have
that.
you seen
I didn't
Glow?
mm-mm. I didn't
Okay,
watch
well,
that.
it's not about Mormons, I don't think. Actually, that might be another. Maybe we could find if there was a Mormon in Glow.
There you go. I'm sure there is. There's always the Mormon in everything
They're
at the end
everywhere.
of
Yes.
the day. When you get to Lee Harvey Oswald and things just end up in the Mormon closet, I'm like, what is happening? Why is this happening? I mean, I wasn't studying that. I wasn't even studying Mormons. I was like, why does this keep happening to me? But maybe it's the Elohim that are following me. So, I don't know.
Well, what else do you got going on? Any shows coming up? Any new research that you've
Yes.
been into?
So I am knee deep in JFK stuff. I have a show tomorrow that we're going to be recording that goes further with Permindex and Sirhan and this Seance of the Nine. And I can't say his last name, Povovich. You might know him. He was like the magic mushroom MK Ultra doctor. But
No,
yeah,
didn't know there.
this is fascinating. Fascinating. So yeah, we're doing that. And then also today I released a Marilyn Monroe episode to go along with Cosmic Peach. And um, other than that, Israel Keys is coming out on my Patreon, Mormons, Murders, and Mayhem. For $5 a month, you get 2 extra shows, and we focus more on the Mormons, murders kind of thing. He was raised as a fundamentalist offshoot Mormon, so he gets pretty weird. And Israel Keys is scary, so scary. Yeah, yeah, making a comeback for sure. And I was already studying it, which wasn't JFK. I was studying RFK, but then it led to all kinds of places. But yeah, now I've learned so much because I always thought, who cares about JFK? Obviously, it was fake. Like obviously they did that. So much more to the story than I knew. So
I think
yeah.
that's really what it is. That's the real litmus test on when they can release this stuff is when they release it and everyone's like, yeah, of course we already knew all this. You're just confirming what we've known
Well,
forever. We've kind of hit that area where people are like, yeah, you're just telling me something I already know, as opposed to releasing at a time where people are like, what? The government did
the
what?
aliens, because of the aliens. The X file is the alien file, and Elon is got X. I mean, all this weird stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, I think it's probably part of, them rolling out the aliens. So we'll see.
And
I don't
then
know.
yeah, for me, I've been catching up on all of my podcasts. As you notice, I didn't fully disappear, but I was absolutely just working nonstop for the entire month of December. But I didn't stop recording shows. I just kind of stopped editing and uploading them. So, anyways, you want to get a head start on that, you can go to the Paranoid American Patreon, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to shows that won't even be airing until March. Like you can go there and probably watch like 20 hours of content that won't even be out for a couple months. Plus, I'll make sure to be uploading all of my episodes there at least 1 or 2 weeks early before they come out anywhere else. And I'm going to continue something I started last year, and that's actually sending Patreons cool stuff in the mail. This year it'll be
Hmm.
comics and stickers and limited edition prints and maybe some leftover patches and coins and stuff. So, anyways, get in on that now because it'll be anyone that has been a member for 3 months. I'll send out like these little care packages. I'll more details on that, but like I'm giving you the heads up on it now, and I greatly appreciate anyone that actually goes to the Patreon or grabs memberships here on the YouTube channel or buys memberships for other people. You guys are making it possible to do things that I otherwise wouldn't have any real extra free time to look into. For example, I have been translating with the help of 3 different people on Fiverr. One of Adam Weishaupt's unpublished books called Diogenes' Lamp. It was I believe, translated to English one time in 2009 to a small group called the Masonic Reading Club. Funny enough, they only made 120 copies of it. And from the reviews that I've read from like the Masonic forums that got a copy of it, they weren't impressed with the translation. It had like grammatical errors and stuff. So I'm taking upon myself to maybe be the one that brings the definitive English version of this Illuminati book out there. I'll have it illustrated. I'll have it all like bound nice and everything. And that'll definitely be available first to Patreons. But Patreon is the only reason that I even have time and resources to do any of this. So if that sounds cool and you want more of that, yeah, please consider joining YouTube subscribers, memberships, and going on the Patreon. So I love you guys for all the support you bring us. And we'll do more of these. We're going to do them more often. I think every other week we're planning on. So catch us in 2 weeks for the next live monthly Mormon Monday, right?
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Love the comments. Love everybody that came. Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlight your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper, the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real, the real, you will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe a language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.